This is the Bears Barroom Radio Network. Parental discretion is advised.
There are so many streaming TV series.
So many channels.
I have a stream.
I just don't know which one to watch.
Is this show worth our time?
I have a stream.
I'm 3 seasons behind already. Is it even worth catching up?
I have a stream.
What's the series about? Will my wife like it too?
I have a stream.
What channel is it on? And who's in it?
I have a stream.
I want to watch something new, something original.
I have a stream.
I want to watch something that's action-packed.
I have a stream.
What's happening, barflies? This is Bears Barroom Radio Network, and I have a stream. And tonight we have an awesome show. With me, as always, is Joe Mandel, Joey Two Scoops. Joe, how are you?
Doing well, man. How about yourself, man? I'm ready to talk about some good HBO shows / movies.
I'm super excited. We have amazing guests tonight.
We do.
So excited. Amazing guests, top shelf. And we're talking top shelf TV entertainment. HBO has got to be the king of streaming television series right now, Joe. They're putting out the best. They're like the Patriots. We'll ask our first guest. The HBO's the Patriots. You know,
it's the Patriots of streaming and premium television shows, series, channels, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, right. I agree.
Let's bring in that first guest before we order some drinks, and maybe he wants to get a cocktail with us. What do you say, Joe?
Yeah, let's do it Bears Barroom style.
He's a reformed lawyer with a passion for football. A national sports writer for Pro Football Weekly, Inside the Pylon, and Patriots Wire. He's the real reason behind the success of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. He knows every pass play of every quarterback ever. I mean, like every quarterback ever. Please give a big barroom welcome to Mark Schofield.
There he is, barflies.
There it is.
Schofield.
Always a blast to be with you, fine gentlemen. Excited to be back here. Excited to get asked back, frankly. I didn't know if I lived up to the billing. You know, when you're talking the Game of Thrones series finale, that was a high pressure moment. I mean,
that was great.
Up to, so, but
it was awesome, Mark. And
excited to be back.
Yeah, well, real quick before we order some drinks, our bartender's a little bit late to work, so. You've marinated on the ending of Game of Thrones real quick. Still like it? Still hate it?
I mean, like I said when I was on it was fine. Like, given how season 7 and 8 had gone, to end it the way they did, it was probably as good a job as they could have done. I think my gripe more than anything else was the way season 7 and 8 played out. But given the point that they had gotten themselves to, like, they could have. I don't think they could have done it any better. And so, I mean, the season 7 and 8, I think, were more underwhelming than anything else. But it was fine. It was fine.
Right. Okay. We're looking forward to those continuing related series from George R. R. Martin and HBO, which will be really fun. And what can we get you to drink?
I'm simple. I'm easy. Just Tito's rocks. I'm good to go.
All right.
Oh, there you go.
Joe will get that for you.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it, my friend.
Joe.
Hey, no problem.
Couple fingers for me and bourbon on the rocks. 2 ice cubes.
Whatever you want, buddy.
Oh, nice.
I think I can do this.
Very cool. Excellent.
Look at that. No hands.
So yeah, we're getting set to talk Chernobyl.
Yes.
Which is the top-rated TV show in television history right now. And we're also going to talk some Deadwood, the movie, or Deadwood, the series, a little bit later on after the news. And what are you drinking, Joe? I'll get that for you.
Sure, man. I'm going to go with my classic. That's what I was drinking all weekend, a little bit of Michelob Ultra.
But if you I'll have to tweet out my video of me chugging a Michelob Ultra quarterback style. But well, before we bring on our other guest to talk Chernobyl, let's ask Mark what he's watching and how's it going for him.
Well, interestingly enough, when I was on with you guys, I said that I was going to do Deadwood. I had not watched Deadwood. It was a confession that I made, and I ripped through Deadwood so I could watch the movie, and I'm glad that I did. But right now, I'm working my way through two different shows. One, Letterkenny, which I had never even heard of. Owen Reese at Reese Draft on Twitter introduced me to it. Canadian show about a small town in Ontario. Comedy on Hulu. I've been ripping through it. I'm now all the way into season 4. I can't get enough of it. It's quirky. It's juvenile at times, but it's funny and sometimes to the point of you can't even breathe. It's that funny. Some of the scenes are that hilarious. And so I've been ripping through that, and I finally picked up The Handmaid's Tale. I had never watched it. Finally getting into that as well. So those are the two that I'm working between. Two vastly different shows, obviously.
Yeah.
You've got one sort of a dystopian nightmare, and then you've got like a quirky Canadian comedy. But those two shows are really dominating my time right now. And for those of you that haven't seen Letterkenny, if you want a quick snippet of it, just go to my timeline. Pretty much every GIF that I've tweeted for the past, say, week and a half is a Letterkenny scene.
I haven't heard of it. Both of those, of course, are on Hulu. Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. But yeah, boy, I've watched the first season of Handmaid's Tale. It was so damn depressing. I haven't gone back.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those shows that you're like, you watch one and then you need like a couple of days. You can't really just kind of rip through it. You need to decompress a bit. But that's why Letterkenny is like the perfect balance and act, because I can watch like 2 or 3 of those and be like, okay, everything's funny again. And then I can dive back into an episode of that, then space it in between. But I would highly recommend Letterkenny. It's just hilarious. They're coming back for season 8 in October. Now it's like on Hulu full time, but
nice.
Yeah, you will definitely, if you like sort of quirky, juvenile at times humor, give it a shot.
Nice. Well, Joe, let's bring in our other guest to talk Chernobyl, because I'm super excited about this guest. Welcome him barroom style and let him order a drink.
Sounds good to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know him as the platinum-piped voice of Bear's Barroom. But little did you know, when it comes to lovemaking, this guy is known as the man who unites nations. This guy knows more about Chicago Bears football and television than Jason La Canfora does about being wrong all the time. Everyone, get out of your seats, especially all the ladies, and give it up for me? Seriously, for me! I'm Dan Aguire. And don't forget to hit me up on Twitter, ladies.
Dan Aguire.
Dan Aguire. I'm shouting you out.
Great guy.
That's right, Barflies. The Iron Pipes is here himself. It's Dan Aguire. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
I am well, gentlemen. How's my mic? Is it hot, or am I good on my level?
Oh, it sounds awesome. Sounds perfect.
Sounds great. Thanks for stopping by Bear's Barroom, Danny. We listen to you all the time. We hear your voice every show, basically. So I'm super excited to have you on to talk Chernobyl. And what can we get you to drink?
Are we serving liquor here or beer? What do we got?
We got liquor and drinks around the house. Aldo is buying.
Yeah, you name it. You name it, we have it.
I'm an absolute vodka guy. Straight.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. Oh, straight. Well, how about a couple rocks?
That'll work.
Well, I didn't have that drop, so I just used what I got.
All right, Dan. So say hi to Mark Schofield.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, sir?
I am well.
And we are great. We are super excited to talk Chernobyl and HBO series being the king of streaming television series right now. And first, we want to ask you what you're watching besides Chernobyl, and how's it going for you?
I don't have a lot going on TV show-wise right now. Earlier this year, I'm really into True Detective. Season 3 wrapped up. Divorced, which I'm going through a divorce, so that comes back in July. And I've got The Affair, which I know is not like a manly man show, but season 5 of The Affair starts in August on Showtime. That'll be the final one.
Oh, nice. Well,
I'm a big Peaks guy. if you all watch Twin.
Yeah, I love the movies too, man. I'm currently watching Good Omens on Amazon Prime, and I love the novel. And the show is the novel come to life for me. It's so funny. There's lots of British and American acting personalities who do cameos and small bits. So some, you don't know that they're going to pop in, and you're kind of trying to figure out who they are and have to look it up. But yeah, it's great. It's very funny, and it's just very entertaining. So I recommend Good Omens if you're watching Amazon Prime. And Joe, what are you watching, and how's it going for you?
Well, the new season started yesterday of Big Little Lies, which is on HBO. My fiance and I watched it a year ago, and then we just streamed it again to get caught up for season 2 to get it all fresh in our minds. And if you haven't seen Big Little Lies, it's a fantastic show. It's kind of one of those suspense kind of mystery shows. It's got a little bit of Desperate Housewives mixed in with it a little bit. So, it's a really good show. You can watch it with your, significant other or your girlfriend or wife or whatever you want to call it. It's a really good show, man. You got great cast. You got Reese Witherspoon, Nicole Kidman, Shailene Woodley. You got Zoe Kravitz. And this year they added Meryl Streep. So, that's a star-studded cast right there. Really, really good show. So definitely highly recommend that. Yeah,
I'm in the middle of season 1, trying to catch up because, of course, I just binged Deadwood, and like Mark and I are recent Deadwood watchers, and I'm excited for season 2. That Big Little Lies on HBO has got a great cast, like you said, Joe. Yeah. And another show that had a great cast is Chernobyl, Joe. How about we just get right into it?
Yeah, let's play it.
All of the good we did, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that to them, justice was done. You see, a just world is a sane world. There was nothing sane about Chernobyl.
That's a little excerpt from the trailer for Chernobyl, man. Ooh, talk about deep stuff. Tooch, I know you were all over the show from when it started. You're real excited about it, so why don't you give your thoughts on the series first?
Well, I honestly, I didn't know what to expect when I first, Chernobyl, it's a docudrama. But, man, it's so much more than that. We're going to talk about that. I'm sure Mark will agree with me. The cast is good, man. You have this Jared Harris, who, if he doesn't win an Emmy, this is a big upset. Of course, Jared Harris, the son of Sir Richard Harris. Jared Harris probably has passed his dad in a number of movies and television shows he's been in. And you have Stellan Skarsgård and Emily Watson rounding out the cast. And, of course, a great job by Paul Ritter as Dyatlov, who, relatively unknown outside the UK, relatively unknown actor who did a really great job, too. And, of course, April 26, 1986, Reactor 4 overheated and exploded, killing 3 immediately, and thousands later from radiation. Death toll probably still unknown. And, Chernobyl, still a lot of hot areas today. 43 years later, or was it 33 years later? I'm not the greatest at math, Joe, but
that's okay, buddy.
I'll talk first. I love the way the show started, and the way the show started is Jared Harris's character hanging himself. So, Mark, did that make you want to watch the show and find out why?
Yeah, it did, Tooch. And I think it's important to, if people haven't checked it out, they released a companion podcast with the show. They released an episode of podcast after each episode. And for example, it's with the show's creator, and he addresses that in the podcast. He says, look, we didn't want to try to build up to some sort of like cliffhanger type of ending. We want to just get it out there so you knew that what you were watching as these events unfold eventually led to this man taking that ultimate step and taking his own life. And that's Jared Harris's character. So I love that they just kind of put that out in the open. I mean, you could, in thinking about this miniseries and how they put it together, there are so many roads we could go down. We could go down the action, and we could spend 30 minutes just highlighting the performances here from Watson and Skarsgård, and obviously from Harris, who was fantastic in his role. You can talk about the sound and the music and the sound editing, because,
Absolutely.
for example, that scene in that episode that ends with those 3 workers in the water inside the reactor room trying to find those valves, and the flashlights slowly go out, and all you hear is the sound of their feet working through water, and those radar, those detectors, and that sort of pinning sound as it goes to black. That was haunted, and I'm getting chills just talking about it. And I could only imagine what those men lived through when they lived in that moment, and the decisions that they made in some of those moments as well. They're haunting me to this night, just thinking about the miniseries and how they put it together. I just thought it was so well crafted, from the lines, the writing, the delivery, and all the decisions that they made. It was just a really well done series, and obviously there are deeper moments and deeper thematic elements that we could get into, but I just thought from top to bottom, incredibly well done by this team.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, this is like master craftsmanship of television series. The way it just kind of, draws you in and keeps you focused. I mean, you're interested in learning too. It's kind of like going to school. So I want to ask Dan. The show is the most successful show, highest rated show in television history right now. It's at 9.7 on IMDb, which is amazing. Danny, why do you think the show was so successful? Tell us your initial thoughts about the show.
Well, I was hoping to jump in on the previous comments that were made there, if that's okay.
All right. Yeah. Also, jump in there.
Well, first off, this is just my opinion. I felt that the show would have been better. You know how in the last episode, the 5th one, I forget what the exact title of it was, they showed the context of the workers that night and how, they were basically, one guy was going to get a promotion, and it builds a motive for why they have to do this test and why they're going to do it tonight. I feel like that would have been, if they could have just shown a little bit of that interview in the first episode. I mean, I like the hanging to start it, but if they'd have done that, just a little bit of context would have gone a long way for me, because the first episode, I don't understand the physics of the explosion, and I get that that's how it's going to start. That's fine. But I think if I'd have known sort of who the villain kind of was as that was happening, I would have enjoyed the first episode a little more. The first one, I was kind of like, just wow, okay, and trying to understand all the Russian names and everything. But the context of what he was just talking about with the fire, or the divers, when they were down low and their flashlights were going out, that was the moment that I got hooked and was like, okay, this show's fantastic. But before, I thought the character building was a little weak before that. And if they'd have just edited it differently, I would have enjoyed it more initially. But obviously overall, I love it. And that was the part where it really hooked me, was with the divers, and how the episode ended with their breathing and their flashlights going out. And like you said, if that was you just feel like, oh, this is the end, It really reminded me of that old movie, The Day After, if you all ever saw that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was a huge part for me. I was like, boy, there's all these people living nearby. Just like, nobody's doing anything to look out for the people who live nearby. Pripyat was like 10 kilometers away from the reactor. All these people, like, do we have anything to worry about? Of course, one time in the bar, Jared Harris tells him, no, go ahead, keep drinking. Of course, people are watching it from the bridge, and there's still today, like I said, there's still hot spots. But one of the main conflicts of the show is the Soviet system. They were so deeply focused on not being humiliated on the world stage that it really caught the people who knew what was really going on, in the crossfire. And that's where the main drama, I think, comes in to the show, where the people are more worried about covering their asses than protecting the rest of the country, or fallout blowing all the way to Germany. The rest of the world needed to be notified. Nobody was getting notification. I think I read somewhere that Sweden was the first country to sound the alarm that they were detecting radiation. Of course, Sweden, the home country of Stellan Skarsgård, who plays Boris Sherbina, the diplomat to Legasov's scientist, and he did a fantastic job too. Mark, what'd you think of Skarsgård's performance?
I thought he was tremendous. I was talking to a friend of mine who I convinced to watch the show. So he got on board, after the second episode had aired. He finally started watching and picked it up, and he texted me a message after he watched finale. He said Skarsgård's my new favorite actor. And I think, Tooch, the point you were just making about sort of the bigger theme of the Soviet system and how everybody was so worried about covering themselves more than anything else. I loved how they sort of, that scene right after the incident where they assemble some of the local party leaders, and it's Maester Welland, of all people, from Game of Thrones, who plays the old guy who, bangs his can on the floor. And he's like, what we do tonight is going to sort of live through the ages. We will stop the spread of disinformation. He gets this standing ovation. I thought that scene was so well done because it really sort of drove home the point you were making, which was in the initial aftermath, let alone, weeks and months later, everybody's just so concerned with sort of covering themselves and making sure that they didn't, get hammered for what was unfolding in front of them. And the reluctance of those on the ground in the moments to even believe that the reactor could have exploded, because it was just something that could not happen. They just refused to believe it. That probably cost lives. And the bridge of death that you referred to, where those people in Pripyat that assembled to sort of watch it and assumed that, oh, this is nothing, you just drink some vodka. And allegedly everybody that went to watch that passed away as a result of their exposure to it. Again, just really well done. I just love the way they crafted Dan sort of, I agree in a sense with Dan's point, where if they had given a little bit of context of how it happened in the beginning, that it might have really worked even more. But I still think that, overall, this was just a really well done miniseries. And for Skarsgård, his performance, I think, was incredible. That scene with the inchworm in the finale, obviously, it's a little overwrought. It's a little like they're hitting you over your head with it. But still, I thought even that worked for me. And typically scenes like that don't do it for me. And so for that to work for me, I think just goes to show you the job that they did putting this together.
Yeah, it really was an unlikely hit. It wasn't something I think I would really... I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. Dan, what do you think? Why? What was the allure?
Once more, I wanted to jump in when he mentioned the Bridge of Death. I was reading an article on Forbes' website, Forbes.com. Not that I'm getting any payback for their plug or anything, but the article just dissected just a litany of different things, including the Bridge of Death. It said that was absolutely an urban legend and made up, and that the show kind of knew that, and that was just a myth. I could go through several others if you want me to. I don't want to steal your format or call an audible and however you want to drive the show, but I have a bunch of things here that the articles that I've read that said that they used a little bit too much creative license on. But again, I don't know if that's true or not, but I did want to mention the Bridge of Death specifically was isolated as not being authentic.
I didn't know that. I know that around here where I live in Illinois, we have a couple of nuclear power plants. I got to tell you that after watching this, I start to think about them a little bit more. So, I know the RBMK reactors had a fatal flaw, and the ones here in the United States, are designed differently and are not, didn't have the unknown fatal flaw. So, tell us a little bit more, Danny, about some things you learned from the show, or did you go out and research outside? Yeah. That's the thing the show makes you do, really, is look up history.
One of the things I have been unable to get the answer on, I was thinking of the first episode when the firemen, when the first responders roll out, and he's like, hey, what's this? And he picks up, I guess it's the graphite. And the other fireman is like, hey, don't fuck. Why? Can I cuss on here? He says, don't fuck with that. And then a few minutes later, it comes back to him, and he's got the burns that are manifesting on his hands. I wonder how long it would take, because there was a delay. It was 3-4 minutes or whatever off the top of my head. How long would it take for you to touch something radioactive that way before the burns would just start appearing like that? I thought about that for a couple of weeks, actually, and couldn't find an answer for it.
Right, that was part of the horror.
Yeah, it was burned in my head. No pun intended.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about when Emily Watson's character visits, she's trying to get answers. It visits some of the workers from the nuclear power plant. Their just flesh was just falling off. Mark, I'm sure you won't forget some of those images.
No, I mean, when and it's juxtaposed at one point with, Jared Harris's character talking about what the radiation exposure does to the human body. And you just see the skin sort of the molecular breakdown at the cellular level is kind of how he termed it. And you see one of the firefighters who's got a wife who says that she's pregnant and she says it's a lie, but it turns out she was pregnant. The baby doesn't survive. But you see the body just decomposing in front of you. And that's another moment where, there were some tough moments in this miniseries. That was certainly one of them. The hunting party sequence.
Oh, yeah.
When they had to go to some of these like apartment complexes and little, villages, and they've got to put down animals, and they're not like wild animals, they're domesticated pets. That was a tough sequence. I know some people, the same friend I was talking about, his wife had to leave the room. It was a tough moment, but that was part of the brutal reality of the underlying event that they couldn't shy away from. And by addressing some of these things head on, it really sort of drove home what the Soviet Union was up against in the moments after this cataclysmic event.
Yeah, I had blocked that from my mind. Thanks, Mark, for reminding me of the.
That's what the box for, right?
Right, Danny. What'd you think about that scene with the execution of all of the people's radioactive house pets? Pretty hardcore.
Yeah, that was horrific, especially when. See, I don't have all the characters. I even took Russian in 9th grade and just didn't retain any of it. So the names, although I like the fact that they have their Russian names, I can't retain every Russian character's name just because of the cultural barrier. But the younger kid that was a part of the team, when he finds, I think it was a husky, and they had just had puppies, or and the other gentleman's like, I'll just go in the other room and I'll take care of it. That's the way I would have been too. I couldn't have been mean to any animals. I wanted to say one more thing though about what he was saying. The article criticized the sequence with you talked about the fireman's woman who allegedly lost her kid due to, that said the baby sucked up the radiation. The article says that's complete and utter bullshit. It says that is not something that's even plausible. That couldn't happen. And it was saying too, like early on, it showed one of the nurses, her hand turned red when she was helping the first responders. It said that wouldn't have happened. Once the firemen had their gear off, that was what was radioactive. Their skin, by touching them, according to the article, wouldn't hurt the other person any longer. It's not like they're a zombie in a horror movie now or something, or it's not rabies, is what it was saying. Now, again, I don't know if this is true, but that's the kind of the stuff you were saying earlier about doing research after the fact. That's what I was reading about, that the radiation would not have hurt her child the way that the miniseries depicted. I sound like I'm being too cynical, but I'm not. I loved it. I was just trying to give another angle to the things that people are criticizing it for, despite the great ratings.
Right. I had heard some of this stuff too as well. But yeah, still there's like time where their dosimeters measuring radiation only went to like 3.6, and they were like, well, we're just getting 3.6, but they needed to send out for bigger machines to measure the radiation. That was a cool part. I know we had the opening with the hanging of Legasov, and then the disaster itself, and then the middle act, middle 3 episodes are basically containing it and some bureaucracy, and then the final episode, which was the courtroom scene, which was really amazing when Legasov was breaking it all down about how everything went wrong, and then it's finally revealed what happened the night of the accident, and the 2 operators who were trying to tell their boss, hey, I don't think we're doing things right here. Their manual had stuff crossed out in it. I think they had to call and say, are we doing the crossed out stuff, or are we not? So that was really cool. The biggest question for me, was why was the show so successful? It's an unlikely hit. What do you guys think? What do you think, Mark? Why do you think the show was so successful?
I mean, I think it, obviously there's some big thematic elements at play about, mistrust of the state and mistrust of a central government, entity. I think Twitter certainly helped. It was one of those shows that had such kind of powerful moments, be they true or not, like the hunting party incident, like Legasov handed himself initially, that, people were watching it live, and it sort of, spread in that way. And I think the social media aspect certainly helped. I think word of mouth certainly helped. I mean, I would tell anybody that I could come across. Like, hey, listen to the show. I mean, strangers on the street. Hey, you're watching Chernobyl. I mean, that's how good I found it. And I think another thing that can't sort of be understated is that sort of post Game of Thrones era on HBO, where people were kind of like, okay, well, what is this network going to do? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if people were like, I wonder if I'm going to cut bait with HBO now. Like, I've watched Game of Thrones to the end. I want to see what they're going to do next. And they come out with this, and it was well done that people probably were like, okay, well, and I don't think it's, I mean, I don't know. This is just a wild ass guess, but maybe HBO saw the lineup of stuff that they were going to be able to roll out post Game of Thrones and thought, look, we're going to put our best foot forward. We really like what they've put together here. And so maybe this plays into it as well. I mean, I think it was just a nice little confluence of events coupled with the writing, the acting, and everything else that went into it, the release of the podcast, which I thought was a nice little thing they did as well. You put that all together. I think it made for some, cultural kind of moment in terms of like miniseries television.
Danny, what do you think? Why was the show so successful?
I certainly can't disagree with anything Mark said there. Although I will point out, I'm probably the only person in America that can say I've never watched one episode of Game of Thrones. It's just not my genre, and my watching of Chernobyl had nothing to do with like, oh, what's up next with HBO. That's the only thing I could sort of repudiate from what he said. I think there is a little bit of nationalism, I think, in the sense that we like to point out the errors of other cultures. And obviously the Russians have made that accusation toward us now with the CIA reference, which isn't too unthinkable if you go through history. But the reason I liked it is because I really like timepieces and I certainly like history. Therefore, that drove me in. And the acting, like you said, is phenomenal. And just the drama we've gone through so many situations, not necessarily akin to that, but whether it be 9/11 or something like that as Americans, so we can feel what it would be like to be in that moment based upon the tragedies that we've witnessed as a culture in our lifetimes, I think. Maybe I'm just pulling shit out of my ass here. I don't know.
No, I think you're onto something, Danny. Do you think that HBO, maybe other streaming service providers, will start mining the historical docudrama events for television programming?
I certainly hope so. I got to quit saying certainly too, but I'm a huge fan of history. So yeah, I would think so. But again, once more, I'm 150 years old. So I actually watch TV on TV and not necessarily streaming.
Do you guys, Mark, do you remember where you were when you learned, do you remember where you were April 23rd, 1986, or April 26th?
I mean, I was on the cusp. I was a 9-year-old kid. I do sort of, it's not as indelible in my mind. Like, look, for me, and part of it was, look, you're growing up in the United States, like the stuff gets filtered out. So it wasn't like an event, like say Challenger. Like for me, like the Challenger disaster, that was my first, like I knew exactly where I was, I was watching it live on television.
Me too.
I mean, this was a teacher, and I'm a kid from the Boston area, and Kristen McAuliffe was from New England. And so this was an event throughout New England, I think nationally, like kids in school watching a teacher on the space shuttle. And then why are they taking the TV away? What's happening? Why are the teachers looking, sad? And why are they crying? Like, I vividly remember Challenger. Chernobyl was one that, you heard drips and drabs, your parents talking about it, you'd see something on the evening news, but it didn't really click for me, like, say, Challenger. But, to a point that you guys were just talking about, mining, historical events for docudramas like this, I would love to see networks do that.
Yeah.
HBO's, the streaming services like Hulu and Amazon, Netflix, there's such a wealth of great stories out there that you could dive into in a similar format that I would just be sitting down watching and eating up, probably just like I did with Chernobyl.
Right now, I kind of I like the way HBO does their series is they release them 1 week at a time, and that to me lends a little bit more drama.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know like Netflix kind of just throws them all out there. They're all available. You can just start binging it immediately. And I kind of like waiting a little bit, for the next episode.
That's a great point. Like during the season finale of Game of Thrones, for example, over on the Watch, the Winter Pod, and the host, their names, Andy Greenwald, and I forget the other main host, but they were talking about how, when you set it up in a format like this, it's like the football season that we're all familiar with, because you get the event and then a week to talk about it, break it down, and it builds up to the next event. And I do think there is something for that. That might have been another reason why Chernobyl was successful, is because you had that period of time where people would talk about it, would break it down, podcasts and other accompanying media outlets for it, to build up anticipation for the next one. I do think there is something to that.
Yeah, I do too. What do you think, Danny? You like having all your episodes at once, or waiting a little bit and watching them serialized?
Yeah, again, I watch TV mainly on TV, so the wait doesn't really bother me. I just had one more thing to say from earlier. I feel like I keep making up my own content. I'm sorry about that. You were discussing how the Russian government in the show was handling things at first at the cost of everyone else's death or their lives.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's necessarily unique to the criticism of their culture, even though we're looking at the lens of 1986. I think if that happens here, regardless of what the tragedy is, it doesn't have to be a nuclear power plant. I think our government does the same thing with covering their asses before any decisions are going to be made about helping others. That, of course, that's just my opinion.
I do too. All right. So, let's have some final thoughts, and we'll do the news. And Danny, we'll thank you for joining us. We're going to talk Deadwood. I know you haven't seen Deadwood, but any final thoughts, Danny, for Chernobyl?
Do you want me to be positive, negative? How do you want me to go? I feel like
It's up to you. You can recommend it, highly recommend it, or tell an anecdote, or whatever you want.
I love the show. Again, the drama was riveting. I'll just go with a couple other things that the articles were saying just wasn't true. First off, the divers. Again, I was so like,
I love that scene too.
Yeah. They said that the show dramatized that the divers didn't volunteer, that they actually were at work and they were told, hey, you got to go do this. But again, playing devil's advocate, in the context of that situation, the divers still deserve the praise, because they could have said, well, what am I making here? I'm not getting paid enough to go in that water. But so they still went. But the article says that wasn't true. I told you the radiation thing with the mom and the kid, the bridge of death, the nurse's hand. They said that wasn't real. And the article was really sensitive about the nuclear power plant, saying that human consciousness needs to evolve and understand things that are so dangerous, make the world safer. It's so odd the way that people did come at it with some criticisms. And finally, like we said before we went on, the Russians, and I hinted to it, the Russians are supposedly going to make their own show now, and called this American propaganda, and said that the explosion was a result or extrapolated from CIA interference, which I would be interested to see what their story actually implies.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. I'd like to see that too, told from both sides. For me, I love that kind of dynamic where the workers who were helping were basically giving their life for the country.
Well, I'm sorry.
Like going to war.
One more thing.
I love that. Sure.
It said that the context of the Russians, there's several scenes, even the main characters, he's like, well, if you don't tell me how the nuclear power plant works, or I'm going to throw you out of the helicopter. They said that all those aggressive threats were not something that was going on in the 1980s. That was more of a 1930s thing with Russia. And the articles that I've read basically said that was sort of a cheap shot at them, because that, and one more thing, I guess it said that the clothing wasn't right. A lot of times the uniforms won't be right, but again, that's nitpicking. But they said the larger point there was the fear of being shot was a Stalin. It wasn't a Gorbachev 1986 thing with the Russians.
Right. KGB, threat of KGB execution. Yeah. Mark, any final thoughts on Chernobyl?
I mean, I think, I would still highly recommend this series. I thought it was incredibly well done. There were aspects, I think, that, they didn't get exactly right, but I think the overall sort of thematic elements, the acting, the score, the writing, everything was incredibly well done. And I do hope it sort of opens up that sort of window into more productions, more series, more even shows, whatever, miniseries, events like this, because I think there is the success of Chernobyl, for whatever reason, maybe teaches us that there is sort of an outlet. There's an audience for stuff like this that's well done, that's historical in nature, and that you walk away having learned something from. And I think if there's more television like this, I think we'll all be better off for it. And so I would still highly recommend it to anybody that came around, asking for what I thought about this show.
All right. Well, I want to thank Dan Aguire for being with us to talk Chernobyl. Hopefully you come back. I know you're a huge Sopranos fan. So we'll have the Sopranos movie coming up. We hope you can come back and join us when that comes out. And then we're going to hit some news right after that and bring in our mystery guest. Thanks again, Danny.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My pleasure.
Dan, appreciate it, sir. We'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you. I appreciate you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
And then, Mark, stick around. We'll talk some Deadwood right after the news with our next guest. Joe, how about a little news and 2 scoops or less?
Yeah, I'd say it's a good time for that.
What? You look like Mary Poppins. Is he cool? Hell yeah, he's cool. I'm Mary Poppins, y'all! Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
It's entertainment news in 2 scoops or less.
Holy smokes!
That's right, everybody. This is the part of the show where I give you the entertainment news in 2 scoops or less. And this week's edition is going to be all Netflix all the time. So all this news this week is in regards to Netflix. Netflix announced today that a movie based off the popular video game The Division will be coming to the streaming service at some point in the future. The movie will star Jessica Chastain and Jake Gyllenhaal, and a premiere date has not yet been announced. But that's a pretty good cast, and The Division has a really, really big following, so that should be a good one. I imagine that probably won't be for a year or two, but that's going to be a big one right there. And then also in Netflix news, one of the shows that you and I, Tooch, loved this year, Love, Death, and Robots, has been renewed for a 2nd season. The original season, the original season included 18 short films, all related to love, death, or robots, or sometimes even all 3. A premiere date and episode count is yet to be announced, but you could probably imagine they'll follow the same format, 18 or 19 short episodes, ranging anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. And Tooch, I know you and I talked about it. We really love that show. So if you haven't watched that, definitely check it out. In season 2, no premiere date, but look for it in the near future. And then lastly, in Netflix news, Netflix hit women's wrestling show Glow will premiere its 3rd season on August 9th. It has also been announced that Gina Davis will be joining the star-studded cast. That includes Betty Gilpin, Allison Brie, and Mark Marone. So be sure to check that out. Glow is a fantastic show. If you guys have not watched it, highly recommend it. And that is the news in 2 scoops or less, my friends.
Wow, Netflix making a push to overtake HBO, man. Netflix, it's amazing how much better Netflix's programming has gotten over these past few years, because in the beginning, man, I got to tell you, it was hot garbage for a while, some of their movies and stuff.
It was bad for a while.
But, I don't know what the Division video game is all about. I never heard of that one. You know what it's about, Joe, or Mark, anybody?
The little bit that I know about it is there was some sort of government uprising, and it's pretty much this division, hence the name of the game, of people that are kind of going out and taking out these dark sectors of it's kind of like a civil war kind of thing going on. I never played the game. That's just my outsider explanation of it, but it sounds like it could be pretty cool. Definitely military based, so definitely a lot of action going to be in that one.
I'll have to ask my son if he's heard of that one. He's a big video game fan. But let's bring in our next guest before we talk some Deadwood, Joe.
Yeah, let's do it Bears Ballroom style.
This guy here is Bears Barroom's voice impersonator. He's a man of many talents. He'll win you over with his wit and his Irish charm. If he likes you, he may even sculpt an alien head for you. Please welcome Brian Shanahan.
We don't get fooled again.
How you doing, buddy?
Welcome back, Brian.
Fine. For my heart surgery, I'm getting back on the stage with the Stones. It's a gas,
Mick Jagger in the house.
Oh,
I put on a
man.
bit of weight, so they call me Fat Jagger now.
The Who
Man
is
of
one
wealth
of
and taste.
Brian's favorite bands. I'd love to set his intro to The Who. And we are getting ready to talk some Deadwood. I know you were angry with me probably 10, 15 years ago when I wasn't watching the show.
That thought you should be watching them moving pictures and your preceding reply being in the negative for so many seasons now. That it warms my heart that you come around. You do my best David Milch dialogue there.
Right. It's funny because I read today actually that David Milch used to write dialogue an hour before they'd start filming. Don't know if you guys were aware of that, but David Milch, the creator of Deadwood. Right.
Yeah.
So, Joe, how about we get into some Deadwood now?
Oh, let's do it, man. That iconic theme music.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make you just want to go milk a cow or hang out with a rooster or something? I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, I love the theme too, man. It really sets the tone for the show.
That guitar, the ringing sound, and then they would be edited right with the horses galloping. I always remember that. And it's just really gave it an open Western kind of movement to it. Yeah, wonderful music.
Yeah, I love it. So we're going to talk about the Deadwood movie, which is supposed to wrap up the 3 seasons of Deadwood. That whatever was left hanging, and the show ended abruptly. I'm not sure why it ended. Mark, do you know why they canceled Deadwood?
It was around the same time that they had Rome, which I've tried to watch a little bit of, and I think it was basically a money thing. It got to be expensive, and they were like, look, we're going to roll with Rome, and we got this other show coming up, Game of Thrones, at some point. You had The Sopranos still going, and so it was more a money thing than anything else. And I just came to Deadwood late. I didn't watch it when it aired, so I really binged it up until the movie. And I can't help but wonder, how Twitter would have reacted to the ending of season 3, figure that was it. I could only imagine what your collective timelines would have looked like if we got that as a finale. It would have been chaos.
Right, because Twitter didn't come around in 2008, I think, right?
Yeah, so
2008.
It was pre-Twitter.
So, right, now, the Deadwood movie, not really a movie theater movie, per se, which is kind of like what we're doing here on I Have a Stream, this is the new movie theater movie, is the home movie theater movie, and this is kind of cool to talk about a series show going to a home movie theater movie. So I really think that's interesting. Now, one thing that was great about I like Mark, I just binged the whole 3 seasons in the past couple weeks. So I'm really living in the Black Hills right now.
Yeah, see, you guys are probably you're more involved in it right now. What I had to do, I mean, I watched the film just without remembering a lot of things. A lot of stuff came back to me watching it. However, later that evening, I went on to Wikipedia, just look at the recaps for each season. Just to, oh yeah, this character, that character.
Sure.
And then it was, but boy, but it had a lot of vivid things that stuck with you, even that just brought it right back to me.
Right, and of course everybody a lot older looking, 15 years older, which was kind of shocking at first for me. With especially Saul Starr, he looked like he was 70.
I agree. He looked like he was gonna drop dead.
Yeah, he's so young and looked so young looking in the regular series. When you come back, maybe it was makeup as well, of course. I'm surprised at Gerald McRaney, who did a great job as George Hurst. He looked pretty much the same. Of course, he was old back then. But I want to ask first. To me, the most important question is: did the movie wrap up the series well enough for you? But Brian, did Did it do it justice? Did it come to the conclusion like you wanted? I know some things were left open and some things were wrapped up. What did you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. I really enjoyed how, every character was true to their nature. You saw a few turns that just maybe just the way their characters evolved. You're putting supposedly like a dozen years after the last season, so this is like when the statehood's happening for, and, things are changing. The telephone wires are coming in, but these people are adapting to the modern times. When the show first began, you're only like 6 years removed from the Civil War. So everybody's just kind of coming down off that. So that kind of informed all the characters because they're, it was kind of a solemn show all the way through. I mean, there's no real joy in anybody's lives back then, just survival. And they did a fantastic job,
Right. Mark, did it wrap up the loose ends well enough for you? Leave some hanging? What'd you think?
Yeah, I think this was a fitted end for most of the characters. I thought it was also, interesting enough, the way I viewed it, sort of a fitted end for Deadwood, the town, because I feel like this town was such a huge integral character in this show, and sort of the evolution of Deadwood over the 3 seasons, and then sort of seeing it now, where they have now one phone. And that scene with the mayor, like, trying to use a phone, was great. I thought that was hilarious and well done. And sort of you've got like the future coming to what was the outlaw West, that was a land of no laws. And remember how the series started with Seth Bullock trying to leave his life as a lawman behind, going to a place without laws, and just to have his little hardware store. Now you've got a U.S. senator coming back to town. You've got phone lines being put up, and sort of the juxtaposition, that sort of eternal struggle between outlaw frontier land and now being an incorporated part of a state. So I thought it was a great ending to a lot of these characters, to the town of Deadwood itself. I really did enjoy it. And it was interesting, like you, Tooch, having just binged it, it was experiencing it that way. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it even more having watched it 10, 15 years ago, and then sort of seeing these characters again in this town again come back to life. I don't know if that would have been more emotional or not, but the way I experienced it, I truly did enjoy it. I thought it was such a well done. And Ian McShane, I mean,
fantastic.
Love him.
Get you to root for a character, and I was talking about this with some friends. You end up rooting for the character that puts out a hit on a girl. I mean, he was a bad human being, but you root for him. In contrast to Seth Bullock, who's a conflicted soul in a sense. I thought Ian McShane's performance was just incredible. And Robin Wright, who played Calamity Jane, so well done as well. I mean, some great acting performances into this movie as well. So I just truly enjoyed the whole experience.
Now, I got to say, and I'll tell Brian that I did try to watch Deadwood 15 years ago. And I kind of was like, I was put off by some of the characters. I don't think I liked the Calamity Jane character the first season at all. I was like, God damn it, so annoying. I was like, and then all the swearing, it was like, cocksucker this and motherfucker this, and a lot of swearing, so I was kind of every other word was cocksucker, So I mean, it was. I think throughout the whole series, there were like almost 3,000 curse words in the show. Yeah. It was like a curse word every 1.8 or every 3 seconds, and Wolf of Wall Street holds the record for like a curse word every 4 seconds or so. Well, or a curse word every 2 seconds, something like that.
No, but, I like your point about that, because also, I mean, they would juxtapose that, and I think they made it better as the show went on. Is the other dialogue that the more civilized folk who came into the town, Alma, the way she would talk with Bullock. I mean, how everyday people who weren't just rough riders out west talked amongst each other, I mean, so it was like the cadence, the way words were structured, and it's just like they all played it so well. The casting was fantastic,
Right, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this was a great cast. But there's so many stars in this cast. There are so many stars. It's just like from Ian McShane, you have Timothy Oliphant, Gerald McRaney, William Sanderson, Kim Dickens,
Molly Parker,
Keith Carradine, Powers Booth,
Franklin Aguirre as the general.
Right. There's a bunch of bit player actors. Peter Jason, character actor who played Con Stapleton. There's Jeffrey Jones, who plays the Deadwood pioneer.
You had Titus Welliver, character actors.
Titus
in
Welliver.
Tons of things.
Brad Dourif as the doctor.
Brad Dourif is perfect.
He was excellent. Kristen Bell's first, but she was so young.
Yeah, that's the name I was just searching for. I couldn't believe it when I saw her.
I mean, there was just so much star power in the show. I don't think we'll ever see another show with this many stars. I mean, really, and then I don't think there's ever been a show where you have the TV show and then 15 years later they bring it back and have a movie, and it's got to be a first. So what do you think, Mark? You ever seen that before?
No, I haven't seen anything like that before, and I think it sort of goes to the following and the love that people that watched the show when it first aired had for it. That they craved it, and I think for some of the actors, they wanted some closure on it. I mean, I remember reading just recently an interview with Timothy Olyphant, and he talked about, the one thing that Deadwood sort of taught him was like the value of like hard work, because he said something like, suddenly you wake up one morning and you find yourself in the middle of Budapest in some godforsaken place shooting some shitty movie, and you're like, Jesus, I really wish I gave it more when I was on Deadwood, because now look where I am. And I thought that was an incredible interview. I mean,
wow.
I think for a lot of these actors, they wanted one more chance. And you see sort of Ian McShane and sort of talking about how, he wanted to return to play in this character. And so to have, the experience to see them years later, doing what they did so well, it was an enjoyable experience. And I have to imagine for these actors and actresses, it had to be for them as well to sort of be back, with these characters and getting back into those mindsets once more.
Well, Joe, I know you're in the middle of binging it now and haven't finished,
yes,
but you watched the movie too. So I was wondering, I'm curious about how that experience is for the movie without knowing kind of like what had happened in some of the other later season episodes.
Yeah, well, it was kind of connecting the dots a little bit as I'm watching, because I finished season 1, but then I jumped to the movie because we were going to be doing it tonight. And there's a couple things that I was confused about, like, Calamity Jane. I didn't know anything about the lesbian stuff. That kind of caught me off guard a little bit.
That was a great scene too.
Yeah, and then
Go ahead.
Timothy Olyphant, Bullock's, being a lawman again, that whole thing was a little different for me. But I tell you one thing though, it didn't subtract from the movie at all for me. I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was a little bit too clean of an ending. It was a little bit, tied a bow a little bit too nice for me. I was kind of hoping that Swearengen's death would be a little bit different. It seemed a little bit, I don't know, too predictable for me, because you saw him getting sick throughout the movie, and it did stick to his character, but at the same time, I kind of wished he kind of went out in a more Al Swearengen kind of way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Killed by a hooker.
Right.
Right. I thought it was a good ending for Swearengen. He leaves the bar to his employee. He'd had a thing for most of the show. The scene where Calamity Jane and Joni kiss, that was fantastic scene. I didn't expect that really, but really enjoyed their relationship in the latter half of the series, season 3 when that finally happens, and that kind of made me like Calamity Jane a little bit more, because for me, she was just annoying in the beginning. I was just like it was an over the top performance. She was just belligerent and cursing and drunk all the time, and kind of hanging on Wild Bill Hickok, who played by Keith Carradine.
He's the only one who looked after her, and
right.
She fell apart after he was killed.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the movie, Bill Hickok's friend, Charlie Utter,
Charlie
is the subject of a murder that's part of the focus of the kind of one of the conflicts in the final episode, if you call the movie the final episode. Mark, what do you think of some of the conflicts in the movie with Charlie and Hearst and the land? It kind of more or less, Hearst was always trying to grab, other people's shit.
Yeah, and I think it was fitting. I mean, I think you couldn't, and Al Swearinger basically says, it's only a matter of time before he gets back to his roots. And speaking of Hearst, I mean, this is who George Hearst was. I mean, he was a guy that consumed land for wealth purposes, basically. And so I think it was a nice way to sort of set up the final conflict in this final episode because there were some sort of historical handcuffs in a sense. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Seth Bullock put a bullet between Hearst's eyes, but couldn't do it. I mean, he couldn't really stray too far from what happened for many of these people. And so, I think the way that they sort of set that up made a lot of sense. Hearst going after some land and, like Swearinger predicted, like getting back to his roots as a murdering cocksucker, which is what he called him when he first came back to town, which was, again, seeing Swearinger on the outdoor balcony one more time was just so fitting. And I like the way they sort of set that up. I like the way they resolved it. I think sort of the inner conflict with Seth Bullock when he would love nothing more than to let the townspeople tear Hearst to shreds, but at his root, he's a lawman. And he has to sort of get everybody off of him and restore peace to that moment. I like that sort of internal conflict as well. Let's go to this finale. I think we're well done. And of course, like I said, seeing these characters and actors and actresses was great.
Yeah, you start out kind of Seth Bullock being the main character. He's kind of
right.
Clint Eastwood of this Western. You want to root for him and stuff, but he's a flawed character himself.
Yeah. I mean, and they intended, reading about this show, they intended Seth Bullock to be the focus, to be the main character. But again, you find yourself rooting for the guy that ordered the hit on the young girl rather than the conflicted lawman. And I think that also goes to just the powerful performance from Ian McShane over the life of this entire show. Just, crushing it out of the ballpark. That it makes you want to root for him in a sense.
Yeah, he was amazing. His stares, his scowls. Man, it just really brought that character to life. Brian, who was your favorite cast member? I mean, who was your favorite character? Sorry, favorite character of Deadwood.
Oh, Al Swearinger. I mean, hands down. I mean, yeah, like you were just saying, Mark, about his character. Yeah, I mean, or about Bullock. Bullock, he's a moral center, even though he's flawed. But Al, he's evil. I mean, he comes around in certain moral quandaries that are always set to serve him. But, when he killed that one girl to put in place of Trixie, that was pretty bad. And I think that broke him in a lot of ways. Because it was just different. I mean, he gave the place to Trixie. He knew it was it wasn't really good for business to do something like that. But I don't know. In Bullock, his character is always going to be a moral center, and the evil character is always much more. You can milk more out of their storyline and the way their minds go and where they may go.
Yeah, I gotta say, the first season, like Swearinger really was a bad guy, but as the seasons went on, he softened up. He kind of, he started to become a little more tender, I guess, if you want to even say, if you can use that term for Swearinger, but. He did kind of soften up a bit and made you root for him, of course. But in real life, the real Al Swearinger, of course, was a much horrible person. And the Hearst character, George Hearst, really wasn't that bad of a guy. But, the way it went with the cast. And Milch didn't even want Ian McShane to read for Swearinger. He just thought there's no way he's going to be this character. And he let him read for it, and that was it. There was nobody else for the part. And like Mark says, he really nailed it. I mean, he became the focal point. I think maybe there was a little rewrite, but George Hearst, of course, in real life wasn't as terrible as they made him out to be in Deadwood the movie. Of course, in real life, the father of William Randolph Hearst,
who was an SOB.
Who was an SOB?
Yeah,
right. So, and of course, the movie wraps up some end, leaves some loose end hang. I think Milch might have wanted the real ending may have been that he wanted for the show. Maybe if he had done a fourth season, that the 1879 fire that burned down the entire town of Deadwood.
Right.
So maybe that would have been the ending he preferred. But I love the setting that Deadwood was in. It's Melody Ranch in California, which was a setting for a lot of TV shows. Man, including Gunsmoke, have gun will travel. I mean, it looks different in Deadwood, but still recognizable from all those old TV shows. But Melody Ranch in California stood in for Deadwood in South Dakota, and boy, it looked great. Just that.
So authentic.
Yeah, and the little camp town they built. And
can we talk for a second,
yeah.
Tooch, about how pretty everything was in HD in 4K?
Sure.
I mean, I was watching the older seasons, and I was like, man, I really wish, I'm being spoiled now by modern day television, but I'm like, man, I wish this was like really upscale, beautiful, Western woods and all that. And then, the first shot of Deadwood the movie, you've got Calamity Jane on the horse.
What a great point.
With the trees overlooking the town. Just talk about a beautiful shot. Yeah. The whole movie was just shot beautifully.
Yes.
It really was. And at its heart, Deadwood is a Western soap opera. I think, Mark, I want to ask your opinion on this. In season 3, it really was building towards a big gunfight that we never got. We didn't get it in the movie either. As Hearst's men come to town and Swearingen's running, he's trying to get guys with Adams' partner Hawkeye. He's got some men coming. Wu has some men coming. And we never got that gunfight. And then in the movie, we got a little bit of a gunfight, of course, where Johnny's shot and some of Hearst's men are shot. Were you disappointed we didn't get a big gun? I think season 3 would have really been a lot better that final episode.
Season 3, it would have been nice to have something like that. Woo, Swedgen. Yeah, I love Woo.
Love it.
I mean, I know, Tooch, you were just asking about everybody's favorite character, and I think, Swearingen obviously is an easy choice. But if you were to pick some of the favorite role players, I think Woo is up there. I think Dan is up there. I'm going to be very disappointed if I don't see in every fantasy league I'm in somebody with a team name of Unauthorized Cinnamon. Go ahead, use it yourselves if you listen in. I mean, I think that Dan was fantastic. Johnny was fantastic. Adams, I think, now he's on Bosch, obviously, but I would have liked to have seen him, But, I think the gunfight would have been nice in season 3. I think it would have been a little bit too forced to do it in this episode, a big gunfight on the scale that we were hoping we would get in season 3 with all these, extra hands brought into town. But, the little bit that we got, I think, was enjoyable in a sense, as enjoyable as a gunfight can be. But I still think that, it was just nice closure, I think. I think this was a nice and fitting coda to the characters, to the town, to the set. And look, anytime a show makes me get on to kayak and start pricing flights to that area of South Dakota. I haven't been to that area in a long time. Like when I went through South Dakota when I was younger, we made it to Mount Rushmore and the Badlands, but didn't get to Deadwood. I'd like to sort of get back there, I think. I'm trying to talk my wife into a trip out to the Badlands now.
I did that too, Mark. It's so funny that you're saying that because I did too. I want to take my family, drive out there, hit up Mount Rushmore, visit the actual town of Deadwood. After that, I was looking to see like how the hotels around there. I'll drive out there with my family, all sorts of stuff. It's great. But if you had to pick a character other than Swearingen or Bullock, my choice would be Dan. I love Dan. Love W. Earl Brown's performance, and man, the fight where Dan. As the muscle for Swearingen fights first muscle Captain Turner, two big guys. That was great, man.
That was brutal.
That was. I wish I had seen that in a long time. I remember that fight. Yeah.
Yeah. How can you forget it?
Yeah. That was just brutal.
One guy's eyeball falls out hanging by the stalk. I'll never forget that. Yeah. But that was one of the great all-time TV fights. Man, that's part of the stuff that you get with Deadwood. So. It was, to me, a fitting ending to the show. The movie wrapped up some stuff, left some stuff hanging, of course, too. Hearst is in jail at the end. He's a senator. And
I have a question. Now, I forgot, did Alma, she was coming back into town. Where was she living at the time where she wasn't living in Deadwood, where she came back with her daughter, the young...
I don't even think they even said where she was coming back from.
I don't think they mentioned it.
I assume New York.
That was, I guess, the assumption. But I mean, with her ex-husbands, her dead husbands, her family, I think that she got killed. I don't know if
I forgot about Ellsworth.
Yeah, that character Ellsworth was a wonderful guy, great actor too. Jim Beaver. Was that his name? Yeah, Jim Beaver. He was one of my favorite characters too. Just a good man. Just a good man did the right thing, and
I love the dialogue of Ellsworth and guys like Farnham and Ellsworth. Farnham was, he wasn't a dumb guy. He was just, kind of the whipping boy of Deadwood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the Farnham character too.
Yeah.
I love William
Sanderson.
Sanderson. Oh, he's great.
I think of Blade Runner whenever I think of him.
Sure, right. The creator of the androids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And wasn't he one of the Daryl and his other brother Daryl on the Newhart show, Bob Newhart show? Right. So he's come a long way. He's a fantastic actor. And, he's one of those guys that you see a lot and you go, what's his name? Damn it. Oh, yeah. Williams. I got to look it up. It's William Sanderson. But after Deadwood, I'll never forget his name. So, yeah, he was a great character as the hotel owner and mayor. And I love when Hearst told him, I don't want to see you wipe that. He spits in his face twice.
Oh, yeah.
Says, I don't want to see you wipe that spit off next time I see you. Yeah, that was a great scene as well, and I think part of the reason when Farnham finally chooses to side with Swearingen at the end of season 3, going against Hearst, who bought the hotel from him. And, for me, I enjoyed the movie. I'm curious to know, people, I don't think I would recommend it to people who hadn't seen Deadwood the show, because they're just not going to get much out of it.
No,
it's for fans of the show. Would you agree, Mark? The movie's for fans of the show.
Yeah, I think this was definitely geared towards the followers and the fans, and even so, it still sort of felt right. But I don't think you could sort of watch this as a standalone. You'd kind of be lost. And they did snip in some clips from the 3rd season to kind of refresh your memory, but that's not going to be enough for a newbie to the series. And so, but I would recommend, look, it's summertime, and if you're looking for something you haven't watched before, pick this show up. You can get through it pretty quickly. It's just 3 seasons, 36 episodes. It's a lot of fun. So I would highly recommend people to go back, watch Deadwood, and then, work your way to the movie.
Right. And Brian,
yes.
Any final thoughts on Deadwood, the movie, before we wrap up the show?
I agree with Mark that I recommend this show to anyone and to savor it, because it's got a lot of layers, and it got better as it went on. And the film wrapped it up wonderfully, and it was so great to see all these actors together doing great work. And and one last thing, the closing song, a song called "Hog of the Forsaken."
Oh, I love that.
Wonderful, absolutely great.
The lyrics
song.
were awesome. If you watched it with closed captioning on the ending song of the movie, hilarious lyrics.
Yeah, just perfect song to close it all out. So
right.
that was great.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on. We've reached the end of the show. And find Mark, tell us where we can find you on Twitter.
You can find him on Twitter at Mark Schofield. Keep it nice and simple. And I know a great majority of those, probably most listeners or watchers right now, are Bears fans. You could look out for the Pro Football Weekly Bears Preview Magazine. That's going to be coming out sometime later this summer. I will have a piece that I'm working on right now.
Oh, nice.
What to expect from young Mitchell Trubisky.
I was going to ask you,
as it were. I'm working on a piece for sort of gaming out his expectations for year 2 under Matt Nagy. So look for that. I'll be at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all those fun places. So definitely check that out later this summer.
I definitely will. I am curious as to how Mitchell's going to do this year. He had a 6-touchdown game against the Buccaneers last year. This is Bears Barroom Radio. At Bears 100, Matt Nagy said they threw a lot of stuff at him as far as the playbook, and he handled it all really well. Matt Nagy's expecting huge things from him.
Yeah.
Fantasy.
Go Mitch.
Man.
Go Bears.
I'm hoping from a fantasy perspective, Joe and I will be looking at Mitch Trubisky, maybe getting some kind of similar production, maybe Pat Mahomes light. He's got a lot of weapons. I love the David Montgomery draft pick. That's going to really help out.
Great running backs.
Yes,
doesn't have to
great
scramble as much, maybe.
Stable of running backs, and all 5 starters on the offensive line returning. So Bears, man, they're poised to strike and go deep into the playoffs. And Brian, thanks for coming on, talking Deadwood
guys.
with us.
Yeah, it was fun.
Can't wait to talk Westworld Season 3 with you coming up down the road when that comes up next year. Of course, I'm sure you're going to be watching The Watchmen. Mark, if you're going to be watching Watchmen.
Oh, yeah, I want to check that out.
To have you back as well. It's going to be serial as well on HBO. And Joe, thanks again for co-hosting and delivering the news. Tell people where we can find you on Twitter, Joe.
Just like Mark, I like to keep it simple. You could follow me at Joe Mandel. Sounds just like it's spelled. JoeMandel.
Right, and I'm at Santucci_John. Follow I Have a Stream at I Have a Stream Pod on Twitter. And Joe, I think next week we're going to try and come back with some Big Little Lies or Good Omens. We'll find out. We'll let you know later on during the week.
I think that's a good combo right there.
Right. So you want to take us out with a little television?
Absolutely. And everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.